talk. What do you want me to talk? All this is going on film too.
Oh God.
You know, Roger and I have been in one of these bands because they don't have the gentle climate.
That's right. No, you're not.
I
just had a hip massagers, you know, and turn it on and pulsating because I have hip problems.
What kind of food? Speak real and you know, real cute and you will learn stuff.
I already got her.
Oh God. Get her when she's in the spa.
Oh, I didn't.
We can show all this right after.
Oh, yes, no, I don't want you to show me floating. No, it's hard to go back.
I didn't know that. I'll come and see you.
Yeah. What do you say?
Except I only have one more week.
I know.
Maybe I will come next week. So I don't.
Why?
Because we had somebody from Anthony Pools when we bought the house. We had somebody from Anthony Pools come out and
Get her.
Yeah.
Get up that high, just keep going forever until it explodes, I guess.
That's addicting. Warm. It's really nice.
Sometimes, you know, getting up at 10 to 5 is just not exactly.
Hey, when Scott gets there, John.
Do you have volume over there?
Volume? What do you mean volume?
Video, audio?
Audio? Sure.
Oh boy.
Of course.
Say hi, Jen.
Sammy.
Arlene, you're on camera. Dad's at it again. I'll come on you tomorrow. I have my bag.
Elizabeth, is it warm in there? I can't hear you a little louder.
Amanda.
Amanda what?
Amanda and George.
Amanda what?
Amanda and George.
And how old are you?
5.
Can you swim?
I know how to back float.
Well, that's good.
I'll give you some melon, but you have to wait.
Is this not too much?
No, wait a minute. Little bite, little bite. What's the other piece of melon? No.
Eat it.
You did? Okay, I didn't finish it. Well, you have a napkin. Okay. All gone. Do it slowly.
Everything that I did and what I've learned and this and that. And he told me, the guy said that I make all the soup, sauce, all the sauces, brown sauce, white sauce. That's what I do.
Bill, look at me one second.
It was. Everything, everywhere. I don't believe what I do now. Nathan's in Burlingame. It's very nice. Yeah.
Never met him.
You never met him?
Well, I saw him in the counter. I said,
Oh, yeah.
here's Nathan. Here's his picture up above. I said, that's got to be the owner. I mean, how many
One block away.
brothers is there?
Used to be
somewhere,
Banyan
aren't they?
Bay.
Where's
Brothers were going to blow Jewish deli in Burlingame, in the peninsula.
I don't understand why
Mark
more
my
people
word.
don't do that
The
because
highest fast
I really.
it's bread. Jewish bread. Cracky or something like that.
Yeah, terrible. Just.
Get up!
Just turn around, Mom. Mom, go like this.
Put it on your shirt.
Rosie!
Looks like a spherical sponge. I don't think this is funny. That's funny.
This one. Like this?
Dad, can you see one?
Wait.
Yeah, I know you stuck here for about 3 weeks.
Body temperature will get. Norm, you should get out now.
Okay, you're on here.
Norm said 5 minutes.
Possibly do that much fun.
Well, let's watch my show, everybody, how you swim. I've been bragging about you all day.
Out of here. I want to be so nice.
It's soaked now. Bad influence on these people. Push that right there.
First stop, the Old West. Probably more westerns have been filmed here than any other single spot on Earth.
It was on this location that Mae West saved W.C. Fields from the noose. The barn is still here, and so is a portion of the rope.
Well, we're stopped here in Old Mexico. There's a storm coming on, and 10,000 gallons of water will come down this street in just no time.
Oh, well, that sounds pretty fatalistic. They used this effect in the movie Earthquake. Now, this bridge we're on is supposed to divert the flood so it saves the tram and all of us on it. It recycles in 90 seconds so that the next people are going to get this too, if we don't die.
I don't think the water's coming, though, this time. Oh! Yuck! Watch the train!
Oh, my...
Sir, look behind you. There's a great big shark behind you. Look out for the shark. Can you hear me? Looks like he's got part of the gear, too. Everybody hang on as long as we can see that flow right there. We know exactly where that shark is, and there's nothing to worry about. Wait a minute. Where's he going? Oh, there he is. Looks like he's headed straight for the beach.
Bubbles!
Oh, that could be bad news. Oh, my... That thing is huge! Rob, a real neighborhoody feel on this street.
Absolutely.
This is Colonial Street, home to some of the most famous houses in all of TV and moviedom.
Certainly. Right over there, the Munsters house, Lisa.
You know, and it looks a little better than it did on TV. It was kind of rickety.
See this next house coming up? 2 famous people have lived there.
Now, I know this was the home for the beaver.
Absolutely. But the other one, here's the hint, no caffeine.
Marcus Welby.
Right.
Lived
Dr.
right
Welby,
there.
right in the same home.
Folks, if you take a look off to my side of the tram, you'll notice that we've been rapidly gaining in altitude. We're going to be going through a tunnel. Now, the weather conditions ahead are a bit adverse, so I have to ask you all to please be very quiet because the slightest sound could cause an avalanche.
Is the road tilting?
No, the road's not tilting.
Nothing. We're not moving.
You're tilting. You're actually upside down right now, Lisa.
This is like vertigo.
You think this thing goes forever, Lisa?
It seems like it's going forever.
It isn't. It's a mirror.
I knew it was all done with mirrors.
By now, you may be ready to get in front of the cameras. At the Screen Test Comedy Theater, that's exactly what you can do. Either catching a few pies in the face, experiencing adventure on the high seas, riding into the sunset, or going off the deep end.
And if you're camera shy, you can watch the A-Team live action show. Or take in an old-fashioned scare at the latest attraction, King Kong, the movie's most famous beast.
And this goes on 150 times a day, every day.
Exactly. Well, Universal is one of America's top amusement attractions. That's why.
Well, we know the tour,
Right.
and we know the movies. But there are other things that go on here, like television.
You bet, television. When we come back, we'll take a look at Universal Television, at some of the big hits from the past, as well as the current successful series.
And the undisputed master of terror in movies and TV, Alfred Hitchcock. No admittance. Back in the old days, that represented the law outside a soundstage, where what was going on inside was supposed to be secret. That applies to television today as well, like Steven Spielberg's Amazing Stories. That series, which is currently in production here at Universal, follows a long tradition of television programming.
When TV became a household habit, Universal was the first major movie studio to plunge full force into television production.
The motion picture side has been extremely important and extremely successful, but if I had to cut it, I would say television really has been the backbone of this company.
Universal has been plugged into television for 30 years, and it's on sets like this that Columbo got his man, Wally and the Beaver went to school, Dragnet went to town, and now Amazing Stories tickles your imagination. But it's not just film that's been exposed here. Stars, too.
Wait a minute. What's going on here? That's what we'd like to know. We got over 50 calls saying it sounded like somebody was getting murdered in here. All I was doing was practicing my violin, like this.
Universal utilized established stars like Jack Benny and turned to movie stars to turn on TV audiences.
Let me get this straight. You want me to steal?
At that time, when you went into television, it was sort of the thought of, well, you couldn't make it in motion pictures, so they were going to bail you out on television. For me, it was the most fortunate thing I ever did.
The studio fostered new talent as well.
You know Linda Benson, a new girl in my class?
Yeah, what about her?
Well, she's been bothering me.
Well, she hit you, hit her back.
It's probably the most interesting place in the world to work.
I was there 10 years, and they were very good to me. That was my home.
I don't suppose you have a picture of a Cocker Spaniel around, do you?
Universal also made household names of some working actors.
I always felt that I was part of a big, really a big family.
I think Universal was always busy. I mean, there's a bustle and a hustle there. I mean, they grab your sets before you're almost finished. They're going to put it in another show.
The one overriding thing in all Universal television shows is a quality production look. The money's on the screen. We take people to interesting places. We stimulate them visually.
Last season, Universal experienced its greatest television success with 12 shows on network's prime time. And amazingly, Amazing Stories and Murder, She Wrote even competed with one another. Same time, same night. Universal is also resourceful enough to tap its own vaults for ideas. Last fall, revitalizing their 1950s TV series, Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
You know, I sometimes consider getting out of this business.
There's one spot in the Hollywood Hills where everything comes to a dead stop. You can't miss it. It's probably one of the most recognizable sets in the world, and it's right here at Universal. It is the house that Hitchcock made famous, the Psycho House. And joining me is an expert on this house. He lived here as Norman Bates in Psycho 1, Psycho 2, the star and director of Psycho 3, Anthony Perkins.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi. Boy, it is just as eerie being here as it is seeing it on the screen.
I know, even in bright sunlight, it has a kind of awesome terror about it. I agree with you.
You know, this sort of sits up here above what is a huge Universal backlot. It's really a small portion of everything that goes on here, isn't it?
It used to be huger, of course, with the taxation on lands like this is very great, and with the encroachment of smog and industrial heaviness in the air, you can't use a backlot quite as grandly and as openly as you used to in the old days. But there's still a lot to be seen here, and a lot. Universal still has one of the awesome backlots. In fact, one of the few major studios that still maintains a big backlot.
Can we use you as a freelance tour guide to sort of reminisce about some of the sets?
Sure, let's do.
When I look at this courthouse building, it gives me one of those feelings of something that's so familiar, so recognizable.
It is. Well, you've seen it in To Kill a Mockingbird, for sure. It was seen often in Inherit the Wind. There was a big musical number in Bye Bye Birdie here, and it was seen fleetingly in Psycho 2, but those are just a few of the many appearances it's had.
I always think of the courthouse scene, the 76 trombones from Music Man.
That too.
And when you look at this, everybody will recognize it from Back to the Future.
Yeah.
Walking down this street, it could be New York or London.
It's been used for both of those.
Chicago, I guess?
That too, well, definitely Chicago. I was just looking at it. It has a kind of bland look to it today, but with the lighting and with the colors of the gels and the way that lamps are placed, it can have a threatening look, as it did in Torn Curtain, or it can have a lighthearted comedy look, as it did in Thoroughly Modern Millie.
Berlin, New York, it works just as well.
Absolutely.
Now, when you look around, you see brownstones over on this side. There are some shops and industrial buildings up there.
Yes.
Very, very diverse.
Well, it's diverse, so in case they want to shoot a neighborhood sort of street, they can use this angle, and if they want to say, well, let's go downtown to do our laundry, then they can go to this side, too.
Are interiors ever shot here, or are those done on sound stages?
No, this is strictly for people to say, hi, well, meet you at the restaurant later, and then the restaurant set in the soundstage is used.
What about when you see somebody hanging out of a third-story window? Are they just pressed up against on a ladder?
They're just on a ladder, exactly. Like up here, for instance, for the Sting.
Of course. Westerns were such a staple of the industry at one time. Universal must have a huge Western section.
Oh, they have a beautiful one right down there.
You know where it is?
Sure, let's go.
I thought you did.
Well, we're really walking on hallowed ground here as far as Westerns past and present go. This street has been here since time knows when. Tom Mix, Hoot Gibson, all the old stars, and the many of the recent ones too. John Wayne worked here, just to name one of the greats, or the greatest.
Boy, you can almost hear the horses and see the tumbleweed, can't you?
Absolutely.
A lot of TV shows from
Yes,
this location.
The Virginian, Wagon Train, Laramie, they all worked here. They trotted smooth.
I bet they did. And of course, right around the corner is a place called 6 Points, Texas.
Right, so called because in the silent days they could, by varying their angles, they could film 6 different scenes at the same time because, of course, there was no sound to interfere.
If only it were so easy today.
Oh, really?
We've covered lots of territory, but we're right back here at a spot that is hauntingly familiar to you, I guess. Yeah, sorry. The Bates Motel.
Yes.
Are we going to see a lot of it in Psycho 3?
Yes, more than there was in Psycho 2, actually. To me, the motel is one of the most resonant sets in the Psycho pieces, so it didn't seem right to ignore it. It's been redone rather lovingly. I was just thinking that it really takes more to build a set and make it look old than it does to build a set and make it look new, because you not only have to build it, but you have to distress it a little bit. And this peeling paint looks like it's been here at least since the days of Psycho 1, but actually it's a new job.
Even though you're so intimate with the backlot and what goes on here, do you still have a special fondness for it and something that kind of gives you an emotional jar when you come back?
Oh, sure. You forget the fact that the paint is peeling and that the boards are cracking and that it doesn't look the way it used to. But you want to see it on a late afternoon when the sun is just setting and it still looks beautiful. And if you can be alone on a back lot and kind of just hear the echoes of the old films that were shot here, it's very evocative.
Alfred Hitchcock and Universal. It's almost impossible to think of one without the other.
Hitchcock worked here off and on for more than 30 years, and as we've already seen, his most famous house is located here, the Psycho House.
He was just renting at the time, though, because Universal is not the actual producer of that film, but his presence was felt for so long, so strongly, that he's considered to be one of Universal's very own.
Come on, Fry.
Ever since Saboteur, with its breathtaking climax, Alfred Hitchcock and Universal have kept audiences on the edge of their seats.
Stop that! Run!
Hey! No touching allowed!
It's Maloney. He's after us.
Aside from his skill behind the cameras, Hitchcock's cameo appearances are also well known, though he sometimes had his hands full or merely a full hand.
Tell him quick. The sleeve. Sleeve.
Hitchcock and Universal both benefited from their long association, and through the years, all of us have tried to cling to the same kind of excitement. Alfred Hitchcock was right at home here at Universal. By the time he started at the studios, they were already well established as the House of Horror.
All of the studios, Rob, had specialties. Paramount was known for its comedies, MGM famous for its musicals. Warner Brothers had gangster movies, and as you said, Universal had the market cornered on horror films.
Well, with so many Dracula films in particular, you might say they had a stake in the old genre.
I wouldn't have said that.
No, but I did, and Dick Shoemaker has something to say about the horrifying story.
Universal's first terrifying hit, 1923, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Lon Chaney Sr., wearing a 40-pound rubber hump and making it look easy. Then, 1925, Chaney's Phantom of the Opera. Audiences were so horrified by the Phantom that when movies finally talked, it was time to bring on the Count.
I am Dracula.
Bela Lugosi played the legendary vampire straight for Universal. No unsightly fangs or gory blood. Back in 1930, Universal used this set to shoot part of Dracula. The film itself was a big hit, so the studio decided to offer the starring role in its next monster movie to Bela Lugosi. But the actor said no, because the part had no dialogue, and Lugosi thought he looked funny dressed up as a monster. So instead, the studio offered the part to an Englishman, William Henry Pratt, otherwise known as Boris Karloff, Frankenstein's monster.
Oh, it's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Karloff's makeup was masterful. His legs were stiffened by steel struts. His boots weighed 18 pounds.
Would you like one of my flowers?
He had a face only a mother could love. Except you may remember, he didn't have a mother. Karloff created another monster in 1932, the Mummy, back again after 3,700 years. Universal never let a good monster die. There was the Mummy's hand, the Mummy's tomb, the Mummy's ghost, and the Mummy's curse. In 1941, a new Universal monster, the Wolfman, starring Lon Chaney Jr. Soon, the Wolfman met Frankenstein's monster. Then in one film, House of Frankenstein, everyone got into the act. The monster, Wolfman, Dracula, the Mad Scientist, and the Hunchback. But by 1948, the studio's main monster was relegated to meeting Abbott and Costello, and the Frankenstein cycle at Universal Studios was over. But certainly the appeal of horror movies wasn't over, because here at Universal, you never know what's going to emerge, say, from that black lagoon over there. The creature from the Black Lagoon was one of the studio's most believable creations, far outranking the mole people, the beast of the Amazon, giant spiders in Tarantula, and big bugs running amok in the Deadly Mantis. And instead of giants, in the film The Incredible Shrinking Man, the monsters were normal size. It was the man who shrank. And in the 1933 classic, The Invisible Man, you couldn't see the Mad Scientist until the end of the movie, a role that made a star of Claude Rains. Many of Universal's horror films had universal themes. For example, the fear of contamination.
I say that if you were injected with this, you'd revert to a primitive anthropoid, physically as well as mentally.
My blood is contaminated with the blood of Dracula.
Whoever is bitten by a werewolf and lives becomes a werewolf himself.
There was the monsters carrying the damsels in distress theme. And of course, the natural reaction that goes along with it. Favorite horror films never fade away. Psycho was followed by Psycho 2, and now there's Psycho 3. And Dracula, he always keeps coming back. So expect Universal Studios to continue making monster movies, as long as people love to be frightened by them.
Coming up next, Steven Spielberg, the Universal hitmaker.
And ahead, a day in the life of Hollywood's busiest studio and a moment in the career of Burt Reynolds, as Entertainment This Week's Salute to Universal continues.
You know, it's hard to believe these are just facades. They're so detailed.
Yeah, they're much smaller, though, in person.
Aren't they?
Yeah.
Well, this is your town, USA, a well-kept, friendly, neighborhood-feeling street.
At least it's Universal's idea of middle-class America. It's also the home to movie director Steven Spielberg.
Home because Spielberg has such a keen ability to focus on everyday people who would live on a street like this. And it is, as Scott Osborne reports, the kind of territory that Steven Spielberg knows so well, where everyday people encounter extraordinary situations.
Possibilities. The worlds that Steven Spielberg examines are full of possibilities. What if? Why not? Just imagine. He's taken us to Close Encounters in Outer Space and Back to the Future right here on Earth. He's chased us out of the water in Jaws and given us a duel to the finish we'll never forget. It was a talent originally recognized at Universal in the late 1960s.
I saw a film, a short film, that indicated to me that this was a fellow who could handle storytelling.
He likes to sit there around the campfire at night and tell all the scouts, and then Cropsey came through the woods. You know, he loves to do that.
What exactly did you see?
It was, it was quite an honor to work with Steven Spielberg at that time, and everything. Because he's almost like a little kid just sitting behind the camera,
I can associate with children. I can open up more easily toward children and about subjects that embrace children than I possibly can about adults, although I'm getting older and I'm actually changing and I'm becoming, I'm sorry to say, an adult too.
He's the best director in the whole world.
He's been honored by peers, immortalized for fans, and even chosen by scientists to throw the switch on a radio telescope designed to probe the stars for real ETs, real-life extraterrestrials. And as Steven Spielberg leads us toward the unknown, what future does he see for his young son when he grows up?
Hopefully, taking a trip somewhere.
Universal is, in fact, the busiest studio in town, and one of the reasons is the executives who run Universal know how to pick those success stories, those winners.
Well, they do, Rob, but for every good decision that's been made, for every success story, like finding a Steven Spielberg, there have been those that have gone the other way. I mean, it happens.
What do you mean, like that story happened 25, 30 years ago? Well, the studio executives who were running Universal then thought that there was no room on the lot for two young contract players. Told them to take a hike. One of them was Clint Eastwood. The other, a young fellow by the name of Burt Reynolds.
Whoops.
He was told his Adam's apple stuck out too far, and he had a chipped tooth, and he wouldn't get it fixed, and he talked too slow. And I said, "What's the matter with me?" And they said, "You can't act." And I said, "Oh." So we were walking up the street to our cars, which were way in the back of the lot, and he, as usual, wasn't saying anything, and just kind of walking along, and I said, "You know, you're in big trouble." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Because I can learn to act, and you'll never get rid of that damn Adam's apple."
They don't just call it Universal City. This place actually functions as a city with its own post office, zip code. Universal has an honorary mayor, its own fire department.
And it's also a thriving business. Everything here is for rent to outside production companies, not just Universal. From the props to the stages to the personnel, everybody is working on entertaining the public. And from that first crack of dawn in the morning to the last shift at night, it's a non-stop operation. And that goes on every day here at Universal.
It's hard to believe, isn't it?
Do we have time for one more story?
One more story, let's hear it.
All right, this is how Universal got its name. And it started when founder Carl Laemmle, before he moved to Hollywood.
Okay.
He was living in New York, and he looked out his window one day, and guess what he saw?
What did he see, Rob?
Well, he saw this wagon go by, and it had Universal Pipe Fitting written right on the side.
And what did Carl Laemmle say?
He said, "Aha, that sounds like a great name for a movie company."
No, is that true?
That's the truth.
Well, thank goodness today Universal is known for a lot more than just pipe fitting or names on the sides of trucks. It is one of the world's greatest names in entertainment, and we're very happy and proud to have shared part of its past, present, and future with you. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you later.
Bye-bye.